regarding a subject that you hit on earlier in the week, Glass-Steagall, I every now and then I have to call in and tell everyone that it had nothing to do with the 2008 recession.
Okay, explain.
If you want to look at what actually happened, is the Federal Reserve cut the Fed rate down to first it jacked it up to 6.5% for Bill Clinton trying to crash his economy. Mm-hmm. It didn't quite work, and then they took it down to 1%, and then George Bush came up with this program to try to put minorities and poor people into home ownership. Mm-hmm. And he even put down the down payment for some people who were on welfare. Mm-hmm. And he got these people into those homes with low interest rates. At 1% is what the Fed was at. And
were these ARM loans? Adjustable rate?
Adjustable mortgage rates. Yeah, that's how he was putting them into those homes.
And that's what blew it up when they went up?
What happened is those low Fed rates caused inflation. The Fed then had to jack the Fed rate up. All of those home loans were tied to interest rates,
right? The
Fed interest rates.
Right.
So when they had to jack the Fed rate up, that cost all of those millions of people, all of those poor people who were on adjustable mortgage rates, it cost all of them to lose those homes, and it put them into a state of near permanent poverty. They're still trying to work out of that.
Right.
And that's what eventually caused all of those banks, and the banks were in on it. The banks were actually following Bush's policies. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's kind of the reason why they didn't go after the banks, because if they go after the banks will say, hey, you guys are the one that told us to do this.
Yeah. But my understanding, too, and I get that narrative, and you're absolutely right, and I remember it well, Larry, but I also believe that the end of Glass-Steagall is what allowed the banks that held these sketchy mortgages to then consolidate them into investment vehicles, slice those investment vehicles up, basically leverage them to the sky and sell them to investors all over the world. And that leveraging and that kind of amplification of that was what brought the whole house down when the things came down. So it was bit of both.
You gave part of the refute to that earlier today when you talked about what happened when Ronald Reagan was president. Glass-Steagall was in full effect.
Yep, that's true.
And Ronald Reagan crashed our housing sector, and it almost caused us to have another recession.
Yeah, it was the S&Ls.
When you look at it, we generally have a recession every 7 or 8 years now. It used to be a recession every 4 years prior to FDR becoming president. Mm-hmm. He actually started changing the way he handled the economy, and it brought more poor people into the system, and they started seeing a little prosperity.
Right, it slowed down the oscillations.
And that knocked down the number of, if I ignore the fact that what he did to the Japanese.
Yeah.
What that did is that caused the number of recessions to be cut in half while he was president. So with people prospering, you don't get recessions. Mm-hmm. But the Republicans still were giving us a recession every 4 years. Right up to this day, they're still giving us a recession every 4 years, even when Glass-Steagall was in effect. And now that it's not in effect, they're still giving us a recession once every 4 years. It's like clockwork.
So, Larry, I'm curious your thought. We have only about 40 seconds here until we're going to hit a break, Larry. I'm curious your thoughts on my proposition that Moore's Law and the data centers are a bomb waiting to explode.
What actually happens with progress as far as these industrial revolutions are concerned, that actually spurs it on. Mm-hmm. And when you saw that activity that was going on when Bill Clinton was president, that was making the economy stronger. The stock market was going like gangbusters because all of the companies that use these new tools actually get more efficient.
Sure.
And some of the companies that don't adjust, they go away. And that's what we saw when Bill Clinton was president. And then what happened when George Bush came along, he and Alan Greenspan jacking the Fed rate up to 6.5%. They basically crashed our revolution, our technical revolution, and it went to China.
Well, that's an interesting take.
It did not crash the whole world's economy. It only crashed it in America.
Yeah,
the tech revolution.
Yeah, the .com. Yeah, interesting. Larry, always good talking to you. I always learn something. Thank you very much for the call. Amazing stuff. Sabrina Hake will be with us, the author of The Hake Take, about the Bondi Halligan smackdown right after this. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
Hey, Thom Hartmann here. KBCS is hosting me out at Town Hall Seattle with special guest Katie Wilson on Saturday, December 6th. I'll be discussing my new book, The Last American President, speaking to the day's most pressing issues, and have a Q&A and book signing. You can get tickets now at kbcs.fm. See you there. Tag, you're it.